Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Good Friday to you all. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Ben Domenech joins me as he does most Fridays when we are lucky. Good morning, Ben. Will I see you at the Scottish Parade on Saturday?
I do intend to swing by the Scottish Parade at least for a little bit. It's a fantastic tradition here in Alexandria, and it's a question of how cold it's going to be if the girls can withstand it or not.
Yeah, I'm not taking the grandkids. I don't think.
Yeah,
if they do, it'll be like 5 minutes
lately, and so I might not risk it. But that's the wonderful thing about this time of year when the cutest people in your life are just bringers of doom and destruction on a regular basis, which you can probably hear in my voice a little bit.
Yeah, the Doodah Parade in California is the closest thing I can tell to people to the Scottish Parade. It isn't really the most well-organized thing you've ever seen, and there isn't really any kind of a float, but the kids get candy and everybody loves it. It's just kind of weird. Ben, there's a lot to talk about. I want to begin with an overnight announcement by President-elect Trump that David Sachs is going to be the AI czar. Now, I've interviewed David once. I don't listen to the All In podcast. You know what they say. The Beltway is Hollywood for ugly people. Well, Silicon Valley is Washington, D.C. for rich people who know tech and not much else. I'm very thrilled, though, that David Sachs is going to be providing guidance and direction for AI. What do you think?
Look, I think that this is going to be one of those issues that this administration is going to lean into particularly hard, given the level of connection that they have with Silicon Valley. And I think that was a big part of the reason why so many people in Silicon Valley who care not just about their businesses, but about the future of AI, and particularly America's interest in not allowing other nations to outspend, out-research, and outgame the system, compared to us, was so critical. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like David Sachs were so vocal. And I think that, this is obviously, the president rewarding someone who had been an early supporter. I think it's a good and beneficial thing. Look, the biggest concern that I have about this, and you probably share it, Hugh, and, talking to people like Mike Gallagher, they obviously share this concern as well, is that we are seeing China, really outpace us in recent years in ways that we don't fully understand yet. Certainly it's something we're all paying attention to, but it's something that can't be allowed to happen in such a critical time in our nation's foreign policy interests in that region. To have China basically, picking up the pace to such a degree that we can't catch them. And I think that that's something that is very much a real threat and possibility. So having someone in that job who knows what's going on is really critical.
Now, Ben, I've already quoted it this morning. A's hire A's, D's hire E's. The talent upgrade that we are getting moving from Biden to Trump. And let's just illustrate it with Lena Khan, law professor, Yale, at the FTC, David Sachs, big tech entrepreneur, PayPal founder, all-in podcaster. That kind of talent upgrade is what we need in national defense. And we really, I do not agree with David on things like Ukraine funding, but I am very glad to have someone who actually understands the definitions dealing with AI and our big tech integration into DOD, not somebody who is a Harvard Law School faculty member. That is not what we need. I'm reminded of
one other thing, Hugh, about this is that I think it's very good to have people who are already established within these fields as opposed to people who are thinking about their next job, which has been what we've had in so much of defense for far too long, is just people thinking about which board they want to be on after they leave. And that's not something that we want in those jobs anymore. We can't afford to have it anymore. And I think that this is a good example of the kind of person who doesn't, he's already made his millions. He doesn't care about where he goes next. He wants to have an impact on policy, and that's a good
There's billions. And this is, to me, I've read a lot of New Deal history, and FDR basically drafted the entire Harvard and Yale faculty to come to town in 1932. Trump is, draining the billionaire world. Everyone's going to have a job. The EOB is going to be worth more money than many countries when they come for their once-a-week visit to their EOB office. What do you think, though? Does that generally reflect a Trump commitment to ideas and diversity, or is it just his donors?
I think it's a commitment to ideas and diversity. I think that, the fact that they happen to be his donors is something that, is neither here nor there. You're going to end up being aligned with someone I keep hearing people saying, well, he's picking all these yes men, and it's like, no, I don't think he's doing that at all. I think he's picking a wide variety of the ideological spectrum on the right, which includes a lot of different people and a lot of different backgrounds, and that's something that I think is going to pay dividends in terms of the way that this is a massive shift away from the ridiculousness that we've had to live through under Joe Biden over the past several years. And you're not going to have the kind of situation that you had under Biden where people just get away with not doing their jobs. Can you imagine someone like Alejandro Mayorkas lasting for a day under Donald Trump?
No.
It's just absurd. And so that's the kind of thing that I think we're going to see the results of it, and the American people can judge for themselves. But it's certainly a sea change in terms of the approach to naming people who aren't just political functionaries or hacks, but people who actually are tasked with doing really hard jobs.
Now, before I turn to Pete Hegseth and the other nominees that are mildly controversial, not Pam Bondi, not Doug Burgum, not John Radcliffe, mildly, Kash Patel will get confirmed. Not sure about Pete. But before I turn to that, in Syria right now, an ISIS-like group is marching from Aleppo through Hama on their way to Homs, and the next stop on that highway is Aleppo. Do we really want ISIS to win there? Assad is just the worst person in the world. At least he's tied for the gold. But do we want him thrown overboard?
No, I think that this is a lesson that we've taken from the past. And it brought to mind, by the way, a conversation that I witnessed several years ago between Benjamin Netanyahu and Daniel Pleka at the AEI dinner,
where
smart. He made the case that the simple fact is that ISIS believes in destruction in the region to a degree that Assad does not. He basically essentially said Assad's a bad guy, but he's in a box, and that is something that I think Americans have learned over the last several years. Is something that is preferable to having the kind of chaotic regime that would result from the success of ISIS and the success of these chaos ministers within the Muslims, within the Islamic State. And that's something that I think that we have to consider in this moment, which is to say, look, he's a dictator, he's horrible, he's one of the worst people in the world. I completely agree. At the same time, he doesn't have the kind of outside effects to our allies in the region that an Islamic State would if established there. And that's something that we have to factor into decisions. We have to be realistic about this, Hugh. And I think that the American people have learned that over the last several years, and the naivete of people who think that there's somehow some easy answer to questions like this has been exposed.
Now, I do see that Tehran, the IRGC, is rushing missiles, drones, and people to Damascus to help Assad. Yeah. We don't like Iran. Typically, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, but I'm not sure here. And I would really follow Netanyahu's lead. I wish I'd been at that conversation because Danny's very smart and Netanyahu very rarely opens up to American reporters. But yes. What do you think about Tehran resupplying Assad and whether or not that will change the Netanyahu calculation here?
I don't know. I don't know if it will, and I think that it's something that has to factor into this decision, particularly at this juncture, given the state of the Iranian regime. And so I think that the overall perspective that we have to have here is one of defending our allies' interests, particularly Israel, and one that is cognizant of the reality of the problem of facing lesser of two evils, as they say in Master and Commander. So it's one of these things that I think is unfortunate.
One of my favorite scenes in all of movies, by the way, is Russell Crowe, the lesser of two evils. Did the kid still have his arm at that point?
I believe so. I'm not sure he's lost it yet, but yes.
He plays an outsized role in the 21 novels, the Aubrey Maturin novels, and yes. The kid grows up with one arm, and
did you see this tease that they want to re-engage with this IP?
No, really?
Just about 2-3 weeks ago, when they were doing a round interview with some of the people over at the studio, there was very much an interest in re-engaging with the Master and Commander IP.
That Maturin is really one of the best characters in all literature, historical fiction. But I like Aubrey. Aubrey's kind of easy to cast, but Maturin is very difficult, very complex character. I'm rereading the Sharp stuff because I reread all the Aubrey Maturin books in the summer. So now I'm marching with Sharp and Patrick Harper.
Your capacity to read these books is amazing.
Listen, I'm listening to them. I recommend everyone to listen to them. Don't go anywhere, Ben. We're going to take a break. I'm coming back. I'll talk with Ben during the break about Pete Hegseth. When we come back, we're going to talk about the craziness in New York City. Welcome back, America. Ben Domenech joins me. Ben, I do not spend my day doing whip counts on nominees, and I don't really believe any of the gossip sheets in town about whether Pete is up or down. But you do. I do talk to senators, and the ones that I know are optimistic, but they may be shining me on. What do you think?
In terms of Pete's prospects, I am on the negative side of that. Unfortunately, I think that there's going to be enough votes that he is shaky on that are not going to be able to deliver this for President Trump. And that's one of the reasons why I think, you've seen the floating of Ron DeSantis' name by the Wall Street Journal and by others. And what I will say, though, is it is a close situation.
That's what I mean. I think it is. Yeah.
Yes. This is nowhere near the Matt Gaetz situation, which was a situation where he was never going to get there. Like it was I'm not sure it was ever below double digits in terms of opposition. And so in this case, I think that, Pete has done yeoman's work in trying to convince people to come to his side. And, a big part of this too, I think, Hugh, is recency factor. A good bit of this is, stuff that happened in the, sort of 6-7 year window, which for those of us who know Pete, I've known him for 13 years. We all know that basically several years ago, he really matured and kind of, left aside youthful indiscretion in order to become, a better father, a better Christian, a better person. And that coincided, by the way, with him a few years later moving away from New York City to Nashville, just a better situation for him. And I'll say this, too, about him. He's someone who has never been anything but responsible around me, around my family members, around those, who I know. And he's both beloved by the producer sector within Fox and everything else. And so I have nothing but positive things.
That actually matters a lot to me because people know people on sets. They do. Yeah. I don't believe any of the anonymous stuff. But when you're talent with a capital T, people know about it and they tell you about it. I know who talent with a capital T is at NBC, MSNBC. I knew it at CNN, and I know who you can trust. So I don't know Pete except on the air. And he's always impressed me. He's smart. I've read his books. Sure. He knows what he wants to get done. But I don't know him on the set, and you're telling me nothing but respectful.
Nothing but respect. And this is the thing. I've known people who worked at Fox and Friends over the last 6-7 years, who have, experienced that with him, love Pete, and also, frankly, are people who know, the folks who, make people a little nervous, make people, uncomfortable or that kind of thing within the industry. And Pete's not one of those people. So look, this is the problem that he has. He did have a lot of indiscretions, I think, in the past. They were, various, you can weight them one way or the other, depending on who you trust. But I do think that he's making the case, basically, to people on Capitol Hill. I can be trusted. I can be a real asset to Donald Trump within this role.
Let me ask you, could he survive the hearing? I just remember the Kavanaugh hearings with trepidation.
No, that's the thing that, I'll be completely honest. I have been in rotational Friends of Pete conversations about this because that's exactly our concern. Can he go through a hearing and make a case for himself, a passionate case that allows him to, not just survive this, but, take on the job
and flourish.
Will have, and actually do the work in a way that he can be confident in. And, that's something that is so much about, his own attitude, his own perspective. I certainly think he's capable of doing that, but that could be the deciding factor in whether he succeeds or not.
You better talk to Mrs. Hegseth because it's going to be ugly. And I do believe, as I judge the online right, that would include you and me, it's rallied to him. But that's not enough. You can't have one Republican break off. Stand by, Ben. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, America. Ben Domenech, editor-at-large at The Spectator. He's got a great podcast himself, Fox News contributor. And most Fridays we do a week in review. All right, Ben. everybody comes to the Hugh Hewitt Show because they like to talk about budget resolutions and the reconciliation process. It's really exciting stuff.
The most gripping thing. Well, why don't we talk about the Detroit Lions instead?
Yeah.
Or Jameis Winston. Can we talk about Jameis Winston?
Jameis Winston's kind of a Pete Hegseth story. He had trouble when he was a kid, then he turned it around, and now he's an inspiring leader. But let's go to budget and reconciliation because people got to know Donald Trump gets one big swing this year, and it needs the House and the Senate to agree on a budget, and then the budget's got to pass, and trailing bills have to fit within it, and they have to be revenue bills. That could be the tax cuts, that can be energy policy, it can be the border, it can be all of the above. Do you think that Team Trump is working with Team Johnson, with Team Thune, to get that done in a hurry? Because speed doesn't kill, speed thrills and turns around economies.
I absolutely think that they are, and I think that the indications are from Thune in particular that these are conversations that he's already been having in terms of his relationship. Obviously, the situation in the House is more fluid only because the margin is so much narrower than people thought it was going to be, aided in part by the fact that the president has picked some of these members to go into his administration. But it's also a situation where I think the Thune team has already been on the ball on this, and I think that they are well aware of the opportunity that they have and the limited opportunity that they have to get this right. And so, look, these are, as you and I have discussed in the past, the outcome of this election was set months ago. It really did not shift or change all that much in the last couple of months. And people, I think, in Washington, particularly in those jobs, have been operating under that assumption for a while. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something that is pretty impressive in terms of what the Republicans can put together. But it is, as you said, one swing in terms of their ability to get this right.
Now, the reality is the Republicans are going to get wiped out in 2026 unless the economy booms. The only way the economy booms is if they make the Trump tax cuts permanent to remove that uncertainty, and they open up drilling, development, housing, a whole bunch of different things, and they finish the border wall as the messaging thing. Those are the big three. And if we don't get the economy, do Republicans on the bell curve, meaning far left Republicans and far right Republicans, do they get that everybody loses if they don't get the budget reconciliation done?
I think that I hope that they do. They certainly should. It's one of these situations where, look, the American people elected Donald Trump in large part because they remember the Trump economy. They remember how it worked for them. They remember how things were, 4 years ago, and they would like to go back to that. They feel like there's a better possibility with him than with the current administration's policies, and that's why they put him and this Republican Senate, into office. That is something that is going to be tougher for them to deliver on than I think a lot of people assume. It's going to be hard because this sort of stuff doesn't just change overnight, and that's the kind of thing that I think that we in Washington need to be cognizant of in terms of the way that people are talking about it and the way that Republican senators are prioritizing it.
Yeah, they need to go so fast, Ben. For once, they got to act like a turnaround in the private sector, which
and
is,
they joke about Mitch McConnell, and a turtle, but it's one of these situations where the Senate really is this giant tortoise. You mentioned Maturin before. It's this giant, turtle, slow-moving thing, that does not necessarily turn on a dime, and I think that that's going to be something that's going to be, pretty hard for them. I do want to, I don't know how much time we have left, but I do want to talk a little bit about this New York situation.
Let's do that during the break. We're going to go to a break, and I do want to ask you about that, but let me conclude reconciliation with this.
Sure.
What would be a win in terms of the over-under on the date? We are 1 month removed from the election. Most of the cabinet is filled out. I don't think it's unrealistic to say you get 30 days, Congress, to pass the budget resolution. What do you think?
I don't think it's unrealistic at all. I think that's exactly what we should be aiming for, and to see that kind of happen. I mean, look, the last time that Donald Trump got elected, it was a shock. The contrast I wanted to set up there is that, like, this time around, people expected it. It was not it's not the same situation as it existed in 2016, and so because of that, we should be expecting them to come in and hit the ground running, to get to have 100 days where they get a ton of stuff done, because that's going to set them up. Really, I think it's probably going to be determinative in whether that 26 wave backlash happens for the Democrats.
Get the whip hand out, John Thune and Mike Johnson, because the window is now. I am back with Ben Domenech. Ben, when I'm in New York for television, I always stay in Midtown. And I've always thought the safest time to be in New York City is from 4 to 6 a.m. when you're walking to Morning Joe or Fox and Friends. Because there's nobody anywhere, right?
There's nobody there, yeah.
And so it's
the
like...
streets are completely empty. Yeah, I know you feel...
And the trash,
yeah.
the vendors aren't out yet. The hot dog smell is there. The dope is dissipated. But now... I don't think this is a hired hit killer. I don't think those people exist. I think they've got a bus ticket from Atlanta. What is going on here, and what's your reaction to it?
Well, my first reaction was shock, obviously, because this is not the kind of thing that you anticipate seeing, especially in, by the way, the most photographed, camera-heavy city that exists in the United States. I mean, this is there's estimates that I've heard. I don't know how much they're accurate, but if you just walk through Midtown Manhattan, you're being photographed more than 100 times. And that's something that I think is just, something where you don't expect people to come and perform this kind of clearly intended, hit that happens in America. It's the stuff of, I've been watching The Day of the Jackal, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, John Wick 5.
It's not something that you expect to see happen. What I do think, though, is that, whatever we find out in terms of the motivation, the reasoning here, clearly the online conversation around it immediately shifted to the idea that this was motivated by insurance costs and frustration with America's healthcare system. And that's something that I think, is, even if it's not actually the motivating factor, we don't know that for certain. It's certainly something that is in the realm of possibility. And that is horrifying to me. It's something that, we definitely need to address. I'm sure you've probably seen Taylor Lorenz posting the, images of other CEOs of healthcare companies. It's as if this is something to celebrate. It's awful. It's horrible. It's not something that it should be acceptable. And look, I understand Americans' frustration with the price of healthcare is certainly something that needs to be dealt with and hopefully can be within this next 4 years. But it is absolutely awful that they would turn around and basically say these executives are just are just people who can be targeted because of the decisions of their companies.
Yeah, putting aside the unbalanced and putting aside that there is a bell curve of craziness that has a right edge and a left edge, and focusing on healthcare in America and the arguments about it, it's never an excuse to do violence. I am curious if you think that Americans believe that healthcare is simply doomed to the inefficiencies. I mean, they're not even in Medicare yet. Welcome to Medicare, all of you out there, because that's worse than anything I've ever been in by a lot. By a lot. It's crazy. And the open season every year makes it worse. But do Americans actually expect that to change? Because it's not really. Obamacare screwed this up beyond, I think, any ability to repair it.
I completely, I wish that I could give you good news, Hugh, but I think that you're completely right. I think that Americans have basically decided that this is just the way things are and that they're never going to be fixed. And that's something that I think is really sad, horrible, and, frankly, a concession that they should not have to make. And yet the political will in order to actually have change, actually, achieve the kind of shift that we need as a country, I just don't think it necessarily exists. And in so many areas, there are, installed interests that want to prevent change because, frankly, they're making a good buck off of the situation. And that's something
quick exit.
I think is unacceptable.
I want Kash Patel so badly, and I don't know him. I've never met him. And I love the FBI. I worked with him in counterintelligence when I was everywhere. It's worse than during the Cold War by a lot. And that's the Bureau's number one job, in my view, not big organized crime, international crime and spying. And they're bad at it.
They're very, very bad at it, Hugh. And so hopefully, this is an administration that's going to be able to achieve the kind of, look, there's a lot of big moving parts here.
Yeah.
A lot of big things that need to be changed. And hopefully they're able to hit the ground running on it because that's going to be something that I think is determinative in whether they're able to achieve their aims or not.
Ben Domenech, thank you. Follow him on X at B. Domenech. Go get his podcast as well and watch him on Fox News. Read him at The Spectator. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'll be right back.